Welcome to the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to Whsmith. Coming up in the latest collection...
I was in Harrogate on the day of publication, and I remember taking half an hour out of a really busy schedule to run up to Smith's in the High Street.
Just walking into Whsmith, seeing my book on the shelves. I think it's the dream of every unpublished author. It's absolutely amazing to see my book on the shelf of Whsmith.
I have grown up with this bookshop. You know, it's an immense privilege.
Quite a lot of my time is spent explaining to people that, I do write books. So it's quite nice if you can march them into the nearest Whsmith and the proof is there for them as well as me. I'd get a huge kick out of it. I'd be lying if I said otherwise.
When my first book was on the shelves at Whsmith's, I went with my mother and my sons, and there it was in the window, and it was the most exhilarating moment, and we all kind of laughed, and I felt quite teary.
One of the biggest pluses of being a writer is being able to walk into Smith's and pick a book off the shelf that was written by me that's on the shelf along with so many of my literary heroes.
I'm so excited about seeing my book on the shelves in Whsmith's. It's just, I've seen other novels that I've loved so prominently displayed at every train station, every airport.
With Richard and Judy and Whsmith, you get so much more than other book clubs. Come on in and meet our new recruits.
We get asked a lot, don't we, Judy, how and why we pick titles to include in the book club with Whsmith. So, OK, I'll put you on the spot for once. Why do you think The Versions of Us made the list this time?
Well, it's a great idea for a book. It's a combination of things. The idea of certain moments, certain incidental, tiny moments in your life determining your fate for the rest of your life is a fascinating one. We saw that in Sliding Doors. Yeah. This one is a slightly different concept. We get to see how the life of one girl, Eva, turns out in three separate instances, all because she runs her bicycle tyre over a nail.
Or doesn't.
Sometimes she does in one life cycle. Another she doesn't. Another she does, but things change completely, and it determines her future. But more than that, I think it's very fresh. It's very freshly written. Laura Barnett, who wrote it, she's only 30, and it has a very fresh young feel. The heroine, Eva, is only, 17, 18, and she's at university, university student, and it has that kind of very young appeal, I think.
And also, I think it makes anyone reading it, certainly made me, reflect on one's own life and the tiny, tiny happenstances on which everything has turned. You don't know it at the time, and if you don't look very hard at the past, sometimes you can't see it. But if you focus on your own past, just like this book, you can see these titchy moments. And if they hadn't happened, we wouldn't be sitting here now, And so in that sense, it's a book for every man. But it's also beautifully written, and I love the sense of period, the 1950s, going through into the 70s. All of that's very, very well done. I don't know how she did that. She's only 30, as you say. But all in all, a damn good read.
Yeah, and I think also what's really attractive about it, especially to women, is that it is told from a woman's point of view. Basically, it is told because all women, when they're that young, they're thinking of what their future holds, and most women hope that it will involve falling in love, getting married, having children, and so telling it from the point of view of those emotional entanglements is very attractive.
For a moment, it seems that there is nothing else to say. Jim can see how it will go. She will lift her bicycle, turn to leave, make her slow journey back to college. He is stricken, unable to think of a single thing to keep her here. But she isn't leaving yet. She's looking beyond him, to the path. He follows her gaze, watches a girl in a navy coat stare back at them, then hurry on her way. "Someone you know," he says. "A little." Something has changed in her. He can sense it. Something is closing down. The idea for The Versions of Us came to me really quite suddenly one morning in spring 2013. I woke up knowing that what I wanted to write next was the story of one couple's relationship played out in three different ways. And it was so clear in my mind, not every single permutation of the stories, but who the characters were and how the structure of the book would work, that I was pretty convinced I must have read it already. I have a very strict routine as a writer. I have particularly developed that because I haven't had endless amounts of time to write in. So actually, I decided that I would write every morning, Monday to Friday, between 8 and 10 as my sort of basic foundation. And that's what I did, really, for about 9 months to get the first draft written. And some days, if I didn't have too much other work on, I would carry on, or I'd come back in the afternoon, and I did some weekends, and, it really took over my life, really, as I'm sure my husband would testify. But that basic sort of 2-hour slot really worked for me, and I was really strict with myself about it. And I went and sat down at my desk at 8, even if I really didn't want to be there, even if I just hated the whole thing, which does happen to every writer, I think. One day in 5, we hate it, we think it's awful, no one's ever going to like it. We want to throw our laptop out the window. And I made myself, even on days like that, if I only wrote one sentence, that was okay, as long as I had done my time, done my 2 hours. The experience of being published has been like, it's such a cliche to say it's a dream come true. I try to think of a better way to put it. It's like imagining this house that you might live in one day and what it would look like, and then actually buying it and moving in, and some of the rooms are different to what you expected, but I mean it really is just thrilling. It's been my dream since I was 5. Since I could read, I've always loved books. I've never wanted anything other than to write novels. It's always been novels specifically, not plays or poems or anything else, just novels. I love the fact that they create worlds that you share in, that they make you see the world through other people's eyes. It's an incredible sort of act of alchemy.
Whsmith is the best place to buy the versions of us. It's the only way you will get extra content at the back of the book, and there are great deals on all the Richard and Judy Book Club titles in store or online. Go to whsmith.co.uk.
Well, welcome to the launch podcast of the Richard and Judy Book Club Spring Selection. And what a launch novel we have for you. It's a debut novel. It's called The Versions of Us by Laura Barnett. We're all fascinated by that timeless question of whether our lives are preordained or the result of just random, chaotic chance. And Laura, in this terrific debut novel, dives straight into the heart of the conundrum. And she comes up with a wonderful, utterly readable story. Well, actually, it's not so much a story as 3 stories, triple accounts of Eva's passage through life and marriage. And they're all defined and determined by a tiny event, a bicycle, a nail, and a puncture that may or may not, depending on which version of Laura's life you're reading and living, have actually happened. And Laura's with us now. It's a fantastic story. I really, really enjoyed it. We both did. It has this sliding doors quality, the Gwyneth Paltrow film, about how, but for the tiniest twists of fate, our lives could take a completely different direction. And we'll get into that in terms of the plotting in a second. But what made you decide to go with that as the concept of the story?
Well, the idea came to me really almost out of the blue one morning in spring 2013. I'd recently turned 30, and I think lots of things in life sort of come into focus at that moment. I'd recently got married and, bought a house and sort of settling down, as it were. Mm-hmm. And I'd been writing fiction reasonably seriously for about 10 years, very seriously in fact, and I had 2 drafts of novels on my laptop, neither of which I felt had quite flown, had quite sort of said what I really wanted to say. So I'd taken some time to really ask myself some difficult questions about what I wanted to write, why I was doing it, why was I getting up at stupid hours in the morning to sit and write around a really very demanding job as a freelance journalist. And the answer to that question was this story. It was about 2 weeks after I first posed that question to myself, I woke up thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to look at, as you put it so well, Richard, that those twists of fate that take us down one path or another and tell this story, the what-ifs that define all our lives.
And the heroine is Eva, and she's at university, and it's in the 50s. Set in the 50s. And the as Richard said, the incident on which her future alternative fates lie is a bicycle puncture caused by a nail, which in one version happens, her tyre is punctured, and the guy who comes to mend it, to her aid, she falls in love with him and she gets married to him. In another version, it just goes the opposite way. Her tyre isn't punctured, she doesn't meet the guy who mended it for her, she marries her boyfriend. And in another one, she does the decent thing, doesn't she? In the third version, she's still fallen in love with the guy who mended her tyre, but she feels she owes it to her long-term boyfriend to marry him. Yeah. Right, yeah. Has anything like that ever occurred to you? I mean, did you look back at any kind of chance meeting in your own life or chance event?
Yes,
Really?
I did. Well, as I say, I'd got married about 6 months before starting writing the book, so I'm sure subconsciously I was thinking about how I'd met my husband, which I have to say did not involve bicycle punctures or small white dogs or being in Cambridge even. But I met my husband Andy at a party in Edinburgh, and we were introduced by mutual friends. But, you know, just like with any meeting of that sort, you know, there's a million reasons why that might not have happened. I might not have gone, he might not have gone, we could each have been in other relationships at the time.
Yeah.
So I was very much thinking about how that could apply to my own life and whether we could have ended up meeting in a different context and whether that would have prevented us from getting together.
Absolutely,
you know, it's the absolutely central, most defining relationship in both our lives, in most people's lives, really does hang on these sort of gossamer threads of chance.
Well, I'm not going to go into the detail here because otherwise my wife will strangle me because she's heard this story so many times. But one of the reasons that we're married, and there are 2 human beings walking the planet today, Jack and Chloe, our children, is because of Rubik's Cube. Honestly, I mean, I won't go into the detail, but it's because I once did a little report for a regional television company about Rubik's Cube, and it was seen and picked up and broadcast on ITV, and somebody saw it at Granada Television, and I was taken across there to be interviewed, and I got the job to be placed next to Judy Finnegan, the presenter, and that's how we met. And if Rubik hadn't been born or hadn't invented his Rubik Cube, and if I hadn't done that story that day, our lives would have been we wouldn't be sitting here
I think
now.
that's an even better inciting incident than a bicycle.
Curse that Rubik.
That's what you can blame.
Yes, exactly. Blame the cube. Okay, but because it's such a complicated concept behind the story, I mean, you've got 3 different alternatives here, and they all they don't just hang on that one event. I mean, they'll bleed in all the consequences bleed into the next ones. It must have been very difficult to keep track of as you were writing it. Did you have a kind of a great big sort of flow chart on the wall in front of you where you? No,
I didn't.
All up there in the head.
I think my head's just really complicated. I mean, I know when we talk about it and when I explain it to people, it can sound complex. But all I can say is it didn't really feel.
It doesn't.
Like
don't get me
to
wrong. I don't mean it's complicated to
I
read,
know
but as a.
Of course, the structure is quite complex, and I think I certainly did have to fight nerves when I started about how on earth I was going to do this. Because when I first had the idea, it was so clear and sort of exciting and bright in my mind that I thought I must have read it already. I was convinced this book existed because I knew exactly who the characters were and more or less what was going to happen to them.
Well,
so
Laura, we have some news for you. Actually, we're coming through the door now into the room. We have the original writer of this book.
Please don't do it.
The
This
version
is your
of me,
life
I think
for
it
me.
was called. No, not at all. Not at all.
No, the book did not exist. I
course it
researched
didn't.
very thoroughly. So, I mean, I had sort of no option but to write it myself. And obviously, when you discover that something hasn't been done, you get excited. You think, well, why not? But then you also think, well, maybe because it's impossible. And maybe,
we once interviewed the writer of The Time Traveller's Wife.
I love that novel.
So do I. I absolutely
One of
adore
my
it. It makes me
favourites.
weep
Yeah,
still.
me too.
Audrey Niffenegger, and she said that she could only work because of it's more complicated timescale than the versions of us. But she said she could only work by having her office plastered with post-it notes of dates and times, and because she had to keep revisiting different places, and she had to remember where she'd been, where the time traveller had been, and how old he was, and how old the girl was, and she was just completely in a maze of this stuff. So, but you didn't feel the need to do that.
I suppose, if I'm honest, I mean, I have a sort of digital version of that. I write using a particular programme which allows me to sort of have digital pin boards, and I kept documents with dates and sort of kept track of it that way.
That sounds really interesting. What's a digital pin board?
I don't ask you. I'm way too old for that. I have to say, though, speaking of age, it's written very maturely. It's a lovely piece of writing. I mean, you know, your use of prose and dialogue is fantastic. I mean, it's really, in that sense, it's a lovely, easy read. You don't think, oh, that's a bit clunky. You know, it all flows very smoothly. You say you're a freelance journalist, and still are, or are you a full-time novelist?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm writing more
in
or
what
less
field?
full-time
What sort of journalism do you do?
So I've been an arts journalist and sort of interviewer and theatre critic for about 10 years.
Ah, okay. So you're in this genre then? I mean, you weren't out chasing ambulances or sort of door-stepping celebrities?
Features and interviews and that sort of thing, yeah.
And have you found the discipline of journalistic writing helpful in writing your first novel?
I have. I think it's both a help and a hindrance. I think it's helpful because you learn, you'll both know this of course, you learn to develop an eye for detail.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing someone, not only are you researching thoroughly who they are and what they've done, but you're also thinking about, certainly in print, you're thinking about what they're wearing and what they look like and what's on their walls and all these tiny little things that give you an insight into who they are. And I think that transfers really well. I think it's a hindrance because I do actually still feel a bit guilty about making things up. Obviously I write broadly in the style of realism. That's sort of the altar that I worship at, and I made a rod for my own back by being very specific with dates and places and times, and therefore absolutely checking everything to the nth degree, like plotting routes around Paris on Google Maps
to make sure
and
they work.
ensuring that they're
I know that.
all that sort
you
of
think
stuff.
someone's going to write and say, that couldn't possibly happen.
Exactly.
That building wasn't erected until 19...
And you want to, but it's also just a feeling that, that it is really important to be as true as possible to life and to the way we experience it. I wanted these characters to be rooted in a world that we can all recognise.
I once was after my first novel was published, I once was sort of verbally confronted with a very aggressive man from Birmingham in the car park of a pub in Cornwall, who said, my wife wants a word with you. I can't do the accent, so I won't bother.
That's never a good opener, is it?
No, my wife wants a word with you. I said, what? He said, buddleias do not flower in February. What? Buddleias do not flower in February. And his wife was next to him, and she was going, oh, please don't.
She was dying with
And I realised that what he meant was, in one of the pages in the novel, I'd said that I had a thing about a butterfly on a buddleia tree, but I hadn't said it was in bloom.
Because you went home and checked, didn't you? Just a minute, hang on.
It's a horrible feeling when people come up and say that to you.
Oh, it is.
It really
is.
is.
Sure.
Well, it's not as bad as the man from Birmingham who once confronted me on a coastal cliff path in Cornwall and said, I just want you to know that I loathe and despise everything you've ever said, everything you've ever done, and everything you say I will do.
Oh dear, this wasn't the same man. He's not following around.
Do you know what? I'm beginning to think there was a connection. Maybe they were brothers. Anyway, listen, let's go and finish with your book, The Versions of Us. It's such a distinct piece of writing, and it's such a distinct storyline. I can't imagine that the one that you're writing now, and it sounds like you're about 3/4 of the way through from what you were saying earlier, is anything like this one. Can you give us an idea of what the plot of the next one is?
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. I mean, it shares some sort of sympathies of theme, I think. But so the novel I'm working on now is called Greatest Hits.
What? Greatest
Hits.
Yeah.
And it's about a woman in her 60s, a female singer-songwriter, sort of British answer to Joni Mitchell, who has been very successful in the 60s, 70s and had a breakdown about 10 years ago and retired from music. And it's set over one day when she's in her home studio in Kent, listening through her back catalogue, choosing tracks for a Greatest Hits album. Right. So the structure of the album becomes a prism through which we learn about her life and her music.
What a clever idea.
Lovely.
Thank you very much.
Great title as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this one, because this one is the one that's available, The Versions of Us, is obviously out now, and it's available in all good bookshops, etc., etc. But one of those good bookshops is Whsmith, who are our partners in the Richard and Judy Book Club. And if you get it from there, and there alone, you get exclusive content in the back. You get a question and answer session with me and Judy asking her some questions and giving very interesting answers, covering some ground we haven't covered here. You got the author herself talking about the process of writing the book and what it meant to her, and lots of other stuff as well. But only if you get the book from Whsmith. So it's your choice. Laura, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Laura. You can keep up with the latest on Facebook and Twitter or via our blog, whsmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy.
And do join us next time when we're going to review The Quality of Silence and meet its author, Rosamund Lupton.
I became fascinated with Alaska, and that started me on the journey that became a novel. I read about this place, which is the last wilderness on our planet, where night lasts for 2 months. And I imagined a mother and daughter journeying into this perpetual night with the temperature dropping and an Arctic storm closing in. And then I was driving down the M3 from London in the dark, and no headlights behind me too close. And I had the novel just almost arrived fully formed in my head at that point. And I knew there'd be headlights tracking this mother and daughter as they drove.